The first time I saw the ship, I thought it looked too small for what we were about to do. The Atlas 9 wasn't one of those sleek research vessels you see in documentaries. It was rusted, patched with dull gray plates, and smelled like diesel and wet metal. Yet, for reasons that were never explained, it was chosen for a government-approved installation project, something to do with signal beacons for deep-sea data mapping. They called me 3 weeks ago, said my experience with submersible control systems made me a good fit. The money was good, the contract was short, but the paperwork had strange clauses, non-disclosure for 10 years, mandatory psychological evaluation, and one line highlighted in red: do not document or discuss any structural formations not marked on provided maritime charts. That line stuck with me. I signed anyway. When I boarded, the ocean stretched endlessly, a sheet of iron under a pale sky. The captain, Marcus Hale, greeted me with a nod and a handshake that felt rehearsed. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His first mate, Alina, handed me a security badge and pointed to my quarters. We're heading to Site 1 tonight, she said. You'll get your briefing at 1900 hours. Don't wander below Deck 3. I asked why, but she just walked away. Below deck, the engine noise was constant, like a heartbeat pressed against steel. I passed storage bays filled with sealed containers labeled with 3 letters, HMT. No one explained what it meant. I counted 12 crew members total. Most were technicians like me, hired contractors who didn't ask questions. During dinner, the cook served instant rice and coffee that tasted like burnt rope. Conversation was minimal. One of the older divers, Grant, leaned toward me and said, "You ever worked near an exclusion zone before?" I shook my head. He smirked without humor. Then don't. If you see something that looks like a tower or a pillar on sonar, ignore it. Pretend it's a glitch. He went back to eating like he hadn't said anything strange at all. At 1900, I joined the rest of the team in the operations bay. A holographic map hovered above the central console, marked with 6 glowing dots stretching along the continental shelf. Our job was to install beacon modules at each dot, calibrated to transmit long-range telemetry from the ocean floor to orbital satellites. Straightforward enough. But one thing stood out. The coordinates had no depth data. No terrain readouts. Just blank space where the seafloor should have been. Marcus noticed me staring. "Don't overthink it," he said. "The Navy's been doing uncharted mapping in this region for years. We're just modernizing old relay stations." "Then why aren't they on public maritime records?" I asked. He smiled tightly. "Because these towers aren't on maps." The room fell silent for a moment. No one looked up. Then he continued the briefing as if nothing had been said. That night I went to the observation deck to clear my head. The air was sharp and cold. Below, the sea looked black enough to swallow light. A single buoy blinked far off in the distance, marking our target zone. Alina joined me, lighting a cigarette against the wind. "You'll get used to it," she said. "The silence down there, the rules, the way the charts never line up with what's real." I asked her if she believed in what we were doing. She exhaled smoke and said, "Belief isn't part of the job, obedience is." By morning, the Atlas 9 reached the first coordinates. The sonar pinged empty at first, flat terrain, minimal currents, pressure stable. Then the signal distorted. The digital display flickered, showing jagged shadows stretching upward from the seafloor. Grant muttered, "Here we go again." Marcus ordered the sonar technician to recalibrate. The shapes vanished, data normalized, but when I looked at the raw signal feed, I saw a single frame, half a second long, showing what looked like a spire or column rising thousands of feet high. It was too symmetrical to be a natural ridge. The captain ignored my concern. "Deploy the beacon pods," he said. As the divers prepared, I monitored the submersible systems from control. The beacons themselves were heavy, each one a steel sphere with rotating stabilizers and an electromagnetic core. Once activated, they'd emit a low-frequency pulse to triangulate navigation grids across the deep-sea trenches. That's what we were told. When the first pod was loaded, I noticed an additional cable coiled near the socket, a black fiber line not listed in any schematics. Its connector bore the same HMT marking I'd seen earlier. When I asked Alina about it, she said it was for telemetry encryption. But encryption doesn't require direct physical linkage to the power line. Something wasn't adding up. As night fell, the water around us grew unnaturally still. Even the surface currents died. The captain ordered all external lights off, saying the submersible team needed complete darkness to calibrate the descent sensors. Through the viewport, I saw the reflection of our own ship's lights vanish, swallowed by the dark. Only the red glow from the console remained. One of the engineers whispered, "Feels like we're floating over a hole." No one corrected him. At 200, the dive systems went live. The submersible dropped into the black, its headlights cutting narrow cones through the abyss. I watched the depth readings climb, 5,000 feet, 7,000, 9,000. Then the sonar returned faint static, followed by a slow-building hum. It wasn't mechanical. It pulsed in a rhythm. The crew froze as the sound came through the audio feed, a deep, resonant thump that vibrated through the hull. Instruments shook on the console. Marcus leaned over the mic, calling the divers, but their voices were drowned by the hum. Then it stopped. The sonar stabilized and their voices came back. They'd reached the bottom. No abnormalities, visibility, moderate, terrain, level. The captain ordered the beacon deployed. At that moment, every monitor flickered. The coordinates blinked red, and the message that appeared across the system screen wasn't a glitch. Rule 1, do not record the towers. Before anyone could react, the display reset to normal. Marcus swore and told us to wipe the log buffer, but when I checked later, that message was gone, completely erased, as if it had never existed. The divers returned an hour later, visibly shaken. One refused to remove his helmet for 10 minutes, just staring at the floor. When he finally did, he said only one sentence before locking himself in his cabin. "There are towers down there." I didn't sleep. The hum was still faintly there, barely audible through the ship's hull, like a slow heartbeat in the water. Every few seconds I thought I heard something beneath it, a low, whispering tone just beyond recognition. The sea outside was calm, almost too calm. When I looked through the viewport again, I could swear the dark water below shimmered with faint lines of light, vertical streaks, like reflections of something standing far beneath the surface. And as I stared longer, one of those streaks blinked back. The morning after the first dive, the air on the ship felt heavier, like the humidity had thickened into something metallic. No one spoke much during breakfast. The diver who saw the towers hadn't come out of his cabin, and the captain said nothing about it. By noon, the order came through to continue with the second descent. The transmission from command was short, robotic, and stripped of emotion. Proceed to depth marker 2. Ignore unverified anomalies. That phrase repeated twice before cutting off mid-sentence. We prepped the submersible again, this time under tighter supervision. Marcus made sure every system was logged manually, no digital backups. Alina checked the pressure locks 3 times before giving the go. The entire ship felt like it was holding its breath. I stayed in the control bay, watching the feed from 3 cameras mounted on the submersible's frame. The lights cut through the water like distant stars. At 3,000 feet, visibility dropped to nothing. The ocean swallowed light like ink. At 7,000 feet, the sonar began glitching again, random shapes blooming and vanishing across the display. They didn't resemble rocks or reefs. They moved, slowly, deliberately. I tried to recalibrate, but every time I cleared the signal, new shadows appeared, tall, vertical lines extending far beyond the range limit. They looked like pillars, or maybe spines. Marcus leaned over my shoulder, staring at the screen. "They're not solid," he said quietly. "Look at the density scale. It's like they're there, but not there." The hum returned low, deep, and rhythmic. It came through the sonar speakers this time, not through the hull. The divers said they could feel it vibrating in their suits. Then one of them, Levi, reported seeing a structure. "Something out here," he said. "It's built, straight edges." No one answered. The feed flickered. For 1 second, the camera showed a shape, massive, black, and rising from the seafloor. It wasn't rock. It had corners, angles, and something like carvings. The surface seemed wet, but the texture looked wrong, like polished bone. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The tower stood motionless, yet it gave the impression of breathing. The sonar showed faint energy ripples emanating from its base. Levi's voice came through again, distorted by static, its humming in sync with us. Then his vitals spiked on the monitor. Marcus barked for the team to ascend, but before anyone moved, another sound bled into the channel, a whispering tone layered beneath the hum. It didn't come from the divers, it came from the tower itself. The pattern wasn't random, it had rhythm, language. For a moment, it sounded like human speech slowed to impossible speed. Alina covered her ears, muttering, "Turn it off, turn it off." I killed the audio feed, but the sound didn't stop. It was still in the walls, the pipes, the glass. The vibration wasn't just noise, it was inside our chests, syncing with our heartbeats. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The divers resurfaced half an hour later, pale and shaking. Levi's hands wouldn't stop trembling. He kept saying he felt like something was listening through his lungs. The medic sedated him. Marcus reviewed the dive footage. Every time the camera passed near the tower, the signal warped, showing inverted images, flipped colors, reversed motion, and brief frames of faces. Dozens of them. At the end of the recording, when the beacon deployed near the tower, the hum surged again. The light from the beacon turned red for 3 seconds before returning to blue. I slowed the footage and noticed something behind the beacon, etched markings glowing faintly on the tower's surface. They weren't cracks, they looked like symbols repeating in a spiral pattern. When I enhanced the frame, the symbols formed words in English. "Do not mark the towers." The timestamp glitched right after that frame. The next second of footage was blank. Later that evening, while the captain filed a false report claiming no structural anomalies, I walked out to the stern. The horizon was perfectly calm. No waves, no current, just stillness stretching in all directions. I leaned over the railing and saw faint flashes deep below, pale blue pulses blinking in a slow rhythm. For a moment I thought it was our beacon, then another light appeared beside it, and another. Each pulse moved in sequence, forming a ring pattern miles wide. I recorded it on my phone. The file wouldn't save. When I looked again, the lights had vanished. At 2200 hours, the captain called a meeting. He looked worse than before, his eyes sunken, voice strained. "We're skipping the next 2 sites," he said. "Command doesn't want us near any more formations." Grant, the senior diver, objected. "That's not what the contract says. We finish the line, we get paid." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "We're not finishing anything, we're getting out of here." Before anyone could argue further, the radio crackled to life. It wasn't our frequency. A voice came through, slow, calm, and precise. "Site 2 activation confirmed. Proceed to next coordinate." The voice sounded mechanical at first, then it changed, warping into Marcus's own voice, repeating the same sentence. Everyone froze. The transmission ended abruptly. That night no one slept. The hum returned again, faint but steady. When I checked the ship's coordinates, I realized we hadn't moved at all since the last dive. Our engines were running, propellers active, but the GPS showed zero change. It was like the ocean had locked us in place. At 3:17 a.m., Levi's cabin alarm triggered. I ran there with Alina and found his bed empty, the porthole window open. His dive helmet was on the floor, filled halfway with seawater. The glass was vibrating softly, as if it were humming on its own. When we played the security footage, it showed Levi walking calmly through the corridor, fully dressed in his dive suit, breathing normally, whispering to himself. He walked straight into the open sea. The last line he said before disappearing was caught on the audio feed. "They called me by name." By sunrise, the sea was still again, not a ripple in sight. Marcus ordered the crew to shut down all systems for maintenance, but we knew the truth: he was stalling. When I checked the logs one last time, I noticed a new entry had appeared automatically in the mission data. Rule 2: never install a beacon near movement. No one had typed it. No one even saw when it was created. The timestamp showed it was written 12 minutes before Levi disappeared. By morning, the Atlas 9 felt like a tomb adrift. Half the crew refused to leave their bunks. The other half pretended to work, eyes fixed anywhere but the black water surrounding us. The captain hadn't come out of his cabin since dawn. Alina handled most of the systems now, hands steady but her face pale. She told me in a whisper that Command sent a new coordinate set overnight, Site 3. The data file had no sender tag, no encryption key, and no timestamp. It just appeared in the logbook, already marked as approved. When she showed me the coordinates, I noticed something that froze my stomach. The numbers formed a perfect line with the last 2 sites. If continued, that line cut directly through the center of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a no-go zone for any standard dive mission. At noon, the ocean turned silver. It wasn't the sky's reflection, the water itself shimmered, like thin mercury spreading across its surface. The sonar kept throwing false positives. Each ping returned thousands of microspikes, tiny moving objects, too small to be fish, too synchronized to be random. Grant leaned over the screen and frowned. "That's a grid pattern. Whatever's down there, it's organized." The captain finally appeared, unshaven and hollow-eyed. "Prep the dive," he said flatly. No one argued this time. We all knew resistance meant isolation. The submersible dropped again at 1600 hours. I monitored the descent, 2,000 feet, 4,000, 8,000, then the feed went black. Not a glitch, a blackout. The video and sonar vanished, but the depth gauge kept ticking downward. At 9,500 feet, one camera flickered back online. What it showed didn't look like the seafloor. A jagged surface filled the frame, dark metallic plates interlocked like armor. Between them pulsed faint orange light, breathing slowly as if alive. The divers hovered near the structure, speechless. One whispered, "It's not rock." The captain's voice cracked through comms. "Proceed with beacon installation, that's an order." The divers descended onto what looked like the top of a spire. The beacon module clamped down, its light switching from blue to steady white. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the sonar feed reappeared and filled instantly with hundreds of returns. Tower-like shapes surrounded the submersible on all sides, spaced evenly apart. Each was nearly identical, smooth, vertical, and impossibly tall. Some leaned slightly, like frozen figures mid-motion. The sonar estimated them to be at least 3,000 feet high. I stared at the data overlay. There weren't just a few of these things. There were hundreds. Elena whispered, "This isn't a field, it's a city." No one spoke for several minutes. The air in the control bay felt too thin, like the oxygen had burned out of it. Then one of the divers shouted over comms, his voice cracked with panic. "They're vibrating the towers, they're resonating with us." The audio feed shrieked with static. The hum returned stronger, sharper, layered with higher tones that almost sounded like speech. The divers' vitals spiked across the monitors. Marcus yelled for them to ascend. Only 2 responded. The third diver's signal went dead. When we replayed the last few seconds of his feed, we saw him turning toward a tower that had started glowing faintly. The light wasn't emitted, it was absorbed, like the tower was drinking from the beacon's pulse. The diver extended his hand toward it. Then the video warped into streaks of static, and his body simply folded inward, crushed, compacted, erased. No blood, no fragments, just gone. Panic broke across the deck. Elena tried to cut the submersible's tether. The captain stopped her. "If we lose contact, command will terminate the mission." I shouted back, "Command isn't even responding." He didn't answer. The divers returned to the surface minutes later, gasping for air, repeating one phrase over and over. "They're not towers, they're gates." After the recovery, I followed Elena to the analysis room. She extracted the raw sonar data before Marcus locked the system. On the map, the towers formed perfect rings, each surrounding a central void. At the center of that void, the data cut off completely, as if the sonar pulse had been swallowed. She zoomed in. The missing area wasn't an error, it was deliberate. The coordinates had been manually deleted from the file. And worse, when she compared the dive log to the ship's internal clock, the times didn't match. We lost 43 minutes during the dive. That night, the weather turned violent without warning. Winds hit from nowhere, the sea twisted in strange spirals. The compass spun uncontrollably even while the ship was anchored. The captain locked himself in the bridge, muttering into the radio, but no one answered him. We heard him repeating phrases like Site Control and Code 9 override. At one point, his transmission echoed back through the speakers, his own voice half a second delayed. But the echo said different words. It said, "The third gate is awake." At 2300 hours, the lights flickered. Grant and I were in the mess hall when we heard a sound, deep metal scraping from beneath the hull. It wasn't waves, it was deliberate, slow, and rhythmic. We ran to the observation deck. The sea was glowing again, but not like before. Now the glow outlined massive shapes rising from below, the same towers we'd seen on sonar. Only now their tips breached the surface, dripping with black water that shimmered like oil. They stretched miles apart, surrounding us. Each emitted faint red light from vertical slits along its side, like eyes half open. I felt my chest tighten. My heartbeat synced with the hum that filled the air again, stronger this time, so low it made the glass vibrate. The crew panicked. Someone screamed that the towers were moving closer. Marcus tried to start the engines, but they wouldn't respond. Every system showed ready, but nothing engaged. The water around us began to bubble. Not from heat, from motion beneath. Elena looked at me and said in a hollow voice, "The towers aren't on maps because they move." And she was right, the sonar confirmed it. Every one of those massive structures was shifting position, slowly circling the ship. The beacon light still pulsed blue in the distance, perfectly in rhythm with them. At 2:12 a.m., another message appeared on the control screen. No one typed it, no one could. Rule 3, do not follow the lights if they move. A minute later, the beacon outside blinked once, then began drifting across the dark sea, gliding smoothly like it was being carried by invisible hands. Marcus whispered, "That's impossible, they're anchored." Elena's face went pale, not anymore. The towers shifted closer, their glow deepening into blood red. The hum became a roar. And for the first time since we started, I realized something simple and horrifying. We weren't mapping the ocean floor. We were fighting it. By dawn, the towers were gone. Not a ripple marked where they had been. The ocean stretched flat and calm, as if nothing had moved at all. Half the crew refused to leave their cabins. The others moved like sleepwalkers, pale and silent. The captain pretended nothing had happened. He ordered us to resume operations, even though no one had touched the controls in hours. Elena and I sat in the control bay, staring at the telemetry feed. The beacon signal was still active, 17 Hz, pulsing every 6 seconds. Normal frequency. But something was off. When I ran the waveform analysis, the beacon's tone wasn't steady. It carried modulation patterns, soft oscillations hidden between pulses. The pattern formed a language of repetition, too structured to be noise. Every sixth pulse matched the hum we'd been hearing through the hull. At 10:00 a.m., Marcus called for systems check. The beacon's core was functioning at 120% capacity, far above its rated output. He acted like it was a success. See, the towers were a phenomenon. We triggered an energy resonance and it stabilized. Grant muttered under his breath, or something else stabilized us. The captain ignored him. We watched as he typed a command to ping the beacon manually, 1 second of direct contact. When the pulse returned, all monitors went white for half a second. Every system on the ship froze. Then came the whisper. It was faint at first, threading through the comms feed like air moving through glass. It didn't sound electronic. It sounded human, layered, fragmented, speaking just below the threshold of recognition. I turned the gain down. The voice got louder. Marcus demanded to know who patched in the signal, but the radio was physically disconnected. The sound wasn't coming from any device. It was coming from inside the hull. Then, in the middle of the noise, the voice sharpened. Just one word. Return. The sound cut off instantly. Everyone froze. The word had echoed from every direction, through the speakers, the floor, even the metal walls. The captain's face drained of color. "Kill the beacon link," he said. Elena typed the shutdown command, but the terminal locked. A new string of text appeared across the screen. Remote access enabled. Calibration in progress, 34%. Grant cursed, "We're not even online, how the hell?" Before he finished, every light on the ship dimmed to red. The engines powered down. The beacon's pulse rate doubled. I stared at the monitors in disbelief. The frequency had changed from 17 Hz to 34, an exact harmonic multiple. The hum that followed made my chest tighten until I could barely breathe. Marcus shouted at us to cut the generator feeds manually. We ran to the engineering deck, wadding through the sound that seemed to press against the air itself. Every step vibrated through the floor like we were walking on an enormous drum. We reached the power relay room. The walls were sweating condensation, dripping onto the floor in rhythmic patterns. It looked like the water itself was pulsing with the beacon. Grant yanked the breaker handle. Sparks burst. Nothing changed. I tried to shut down the auxiliary systems manually, but the override light flickered with a message. "Do not interrupt connection." I stared at it until something else began typing itself underneath, like invisible hands were using the console. "You are not in control." Elena screamed for us to get out. We ran back toward the control deck, the hum now pounding so hard it blurred my vision. When we reached the main console, every display was flashing between system diagnostics and video feeds, not ours, but something else. Underwater footage, live. It showed the beacon standing upright beside one of the black towers. Both were glowing, synchronized perfectly, but something was moving in the frame, slow, deliberate shapes drifting in and out of the light. They looked human at first glance, then wrong on closer inspection. Too tall, arms too long, heads tilted at impossible angles. They circled the beacon, touching it with elongated hands. Every time one made contact, the signal spiked. Grant whispered, "They're feeding on it." Then the feed glitched again, and for a single frame, one of the shapes turned its head toward the camera. Its eyes glowed white through the black water. It wasn't swimming. It was standing upright, unmoving, just staring. Elena slammed the power button. The monitor went dark. The captain didn't say a word for a long time. Then he finally spoke. "We finished the job. We drop the remaining beacons. We collect our pay, and we never talk about this again." I asked him what good finishing would do if the ocean itself was reacting to us. He didn't answer. He just said, "Orders are orders." That night, the beacon's signal didn't stop. Its pulse echoed through every steel beam of the ship. The crew tried to sleep, but some started bleeding from their noses or grinding their teeth in their bunks. I couldn't sleep either. I walked to the observation deck. The ocean was alive with faint light, thousands of blue filaments drifting just beneath the surface. They moved like veins, connected to something deeper. Each pulse matched the beacon rhythm exactly. Then the water shifted. Something massive moved below us, large enough to tilt the ship a few degrees. I gripped the railing as bubbles rose, and for a split second I saw it, a dark silhouette far below, shaped like the tower but broader, spreading like a root system. It wasn't rising. It was waking up. At 2:37 a.m., the diver who'd gone missing at the last sight came back. We found him standing on the aft deck, suit dripping with black water, face pale and expressionless. His helmet light flickered. He shouldn't have been alive. No decompression, no oxygen left. Marcus froze, Levi. The diver tilted his head slowly. The speaker in his helmet clicked on by itself. The voice that came through wasn't his. "You shouldn't have lit the tower." Then his suit collapsed inward, like the air inside him had been sucked out. His body hit the deck with a hollow thud, leaving a puddle of seawater that steamed in the cold air. We all stood in silence. No one moved. By morning, the beacon's signal disappeared from the radar. Not offline, gone, wiped from every record. But the hum didn't stop. It had changed again, slower, deeper, like it was breathing in sync with the waves. Elena said she heard whispering coming from the engine vents. Grant said he dreamed of voices calling from beneath the hull. Marcus stopped giving orders entirely. He just stared at the ocean, muttering coordinates under his breath. And I kept thinking about the word we heard in the signal. Return. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like an invitation. The Atlas 9 never fully recovered after the fourth sight. Something in its systems changed, quietly, invisibly, but we all felt it. The hum was still there, buried deep under every sound, like the ship had a heartbeat of its own. The captain ordered diagnostics at dawn. Every sensor returned normal. Voltage steady, oxygen normal, hull pressure stable, but the readouts felt wrong. The numbers didn't fluctuate anymore, they just hovered, as if time itself had stopped moving inside the data. Elena and I double-checked by hand, connecting old analog meters to confirm power levels. The gauges pulsed in rhythm with the hum. Even the needles were moving to its beat. Grant looked at me and said, "It's syncing with us." That afternoon, communications failed. We couldn't raise command or any nearby vessel. The radio static wasn't random. It followed the same pulsing pattern as the beacon before it vanished. When Elena boosted the frequency range, the static shaped into bursts of distorted sound. Buried inside was speech, our own voices, recorded from past mission logs, playing back out of order. One moment it was Marcus calling for a depth reading. The next, it was me describing the first beacon. Then Elena saying, "Don't interrupt the connection." She froze when she heard it. "I never said that," she whispered. At 1600 hours, the lights flickered. The control monitors began looping camera feeds from empty corridors, repeating every 6 seconds. Grant swore he saw something behind him on one of the screens, a shadow shaped like a man leaning against the wall. When he turned around, no one was there. Later, while checking the aft generator, he screamed, We ran to him and found a handprint burned into the steel panel, long, thin fingers, as if pressed from the inside of the metal. We tried to scrub it off. The mark pulsed faintly, glowing the same dull orange as the towers. The crew started to crack. 2 technicians locked themselves in the supply room, refusing to work. Another smashed one of the comm units with a wrench after it began whispering through static. Marcus tried to hold authority, but his voice was hollow now. He stopped sleeping, packing the deck at night, repeating lines from his last radio contact. I caught him once staring into the dark water, mouthing words silently, like he was listening to someone speak below the surface. That night, the engines cut out completely. We drifted in absolute silence. The hum grew louder. I checked the logs and found something impossible. The system had been recording new data entries every hour, all timestamped perfectly, but no one had typed them. The entries were sentences, single lines. The towers breathe. They feed on frequency. Every signal is a mouth. The last one appeared right in front of me as I watched. We are already below. I turned off the terminal and unplugged it from the main grid. The screen stayed on. Alina found me later in the control bay, staring at the black monitors that now displayed faint outlines of shapes moving underwater. The feed wasn't from any of our cameras. The image showed the hull of our ship from an external view, like something was observing us from below. Small lights drifted upward, passing over the screen like falling snow. Each light blinked once, then vanished. She whispered, "Those look like eyes." The signal faded. When the display cleared, I noticed my own reflection in the dark glass wasn't moving in sync with me. By morning, the temperature inside the ship dropped by 10 degrees. Frost gathered along the portholes even though we were above temperate waters. When the sun rose, the light didn't reach the deck. It dimmed as if the air itself refused to carry it. Grant kept coughing, said his lungs felt like they were filled with water. When Alina checked his vitals, his oxygen saturation was normal, but his breath came out misty, like vapor from deep pressure. At 0927, the engines roared back to life on their own. None of us touched the controls. The navigation system plotted a new course. No coordinates, no direction, just a destination marker labeled Zone Null. Marcus tried to override it, but the wheel didn't respond. The rudder locked. We were being steered by something else. Later, we heard footsteps in the lower deck, slow, heavy, metallic. Marcus sent 2 men to check. They never came back. When we viewed the security feed, the hallway camera showed them turning a corner and stopping suddenly. Something dark passed behind them, a blur of movement like fabric floating underwater. The men didn't scream or run. They just stood still as the shadow enveloped them. The feed glitched, and when it came back, the corridor was empty. We watched the replay. The timecode skipped exactly 6 minutes, the same interval as the beacon pulses. By the 5th night, the crew barely spoke. We moved through the ship like ghosts. Food went untouched. The hum filled every silence until we couldn't tell if it was external or inside our heads. At 0200, Alina shook me awake. "Listen," she whispered. I sat up. The hum was gone. For the first time in days, everything was quiet. Then the walls began to breathe. Not figuratively breathe. The metal flexed inward and outward in slow, shallow movements, as if the ship itself inhaled through invisible lungs. Alina clutched my arm. "It's mimicking us." We ran to the deck. The air outside shimmered like heat mirage, but it was night. The sea reflected faint light from below, not above. That's when the beacons reappeared on sonar, 4 of them, glowing white, forming a spiral around our position. The 5th was missing. In their center, the signal from Zone Null pulsed once. Then everything shut down. We woke to daylight streaming through the portholes, though none of us remembered falling asleep. The power was still off, but all instruments were frozen on one message across every screen. Rule 4, if the systems speak, do not answer. Alina's voice shook. "It's teaching us rules, one at a time." Grant laughed weakly. "Then who's breaking them?" The hum returned faintly, slower now, like a heartbeat trying to sync with ours. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. Every malfunction, every whisper, every change in rhythm wasn't random. The ship wasn't dying. It was learning. We reached the second site 3 days later, though none of us remembered traveling. The log said we'd covered 60 nautical miles east, but the engines had never turned on. The captain pretended not to notice. No one dared to ask. The ocean there was warm, too warm. The air smelled faintly metallic, and when I landed over the rail, the surface shimmered with faint threads of gold light winding below like veins. Grant ran a thermal scan. The temperature of the upper water column was almost 30 degrees C, impossible at that depth. The ocean was supposed to get colder as we went down. Here it was breathing heat. The sonar started picking up shapes immediately. Not towers this time, flat, irregular forms scattered across the seabed like wreckage fields, but the outlines didn't match any known vessel. Each wreck was circular, layered with smooth ribs that looked half organic, half machined. Marcus ordered us to prepare the second beacon. He spoke like a man reading from a script. His eyes were empty, and every order came out in a whisper. Alina leaned close and said, "He's hearing them again." The divers suited up, but Grant refused to go. "I'm not diving into that heat," he said. "You drop that thing, you'll wake whatever's down there again." Marcus glared, "You'll do your job." Grant spat on the deck and walked away. Marcus sent me instead. I'd never been deeper than 2,000 feet before. The descent was instant nausea. The deeper we went, the more the light outside turned orange, like we were sinking into liquid fire. My hands shook on the controls. At 9,000 feet, the wreckage appeared on camera, massive circular shells covered in coral that pulsed faintly. Through the thin sediment drifting above them, I could see cracks glowing like embers. Something moved between them, long, slow shapes that slid through the light like serpents made of shadow. I called up to the ship, but static answered. The comms hissed softly, then whispered my name. Not Marcus, not Elena, me. I shut off the channel. The voice kept speaking anyway, muffled inside my helmet. It said, "Beacon 3 is waiting." I turned the submersible camera left. A hole gaped in the seafloor, a circular pit rimmed with black coral. The light there was wrong. It didn't glow, it devoured. Every nearby current flowed toward it. And at its edge stood a shape, motionless, like a figure carved from stone. I froze, trying to zoom in, but the camera feed blurred every time. The figure was tall, humanoid, draped in strands of kelp or cables. It faced the beacon cradle we dropped on our last dive, as though expecting it. I reversed thrust, the water fought me, my sub trembled, instrument stuttering. Then the pit exhaled. A burst of bubbles and silt rose, and I saw something massive underneath, a circular structure turning slowly, like an eye opening. The current dragged me closer, the lights dimmed. Before I blacked out, I saw a flash, an enormous hand or something like one, brushing against the sub's hull. When I woke up, I was on the ship's floor. Elena was kneeling over me, shaking my shoulders. My suit was soaked, though I hadn't surfaced through the airlock. The others stared from a distance, afraid to come near. "How did I get back?" I asked. Marcus said nothing. He just handed me a tablet. On the screen was the submersible feed from my last minute before blackout. The camera showed my vessel resting motionless near the pit. Then from the black coral, several shapes began to rise. They weren't fish, they weren't human. They had faces, human faces, hundreds of them, embedded across their bodies, eyes open, mouths moving in silent screams. Each body flowed like liquid, merging and separating, reforming shapes of bone and sinew. When one of them touched the sub's camera lens, the feed cut to black. Alina whispered, "You were down there for 6 hours." After that, I couldn't speak for a while. The air felt thick with vibration again. The hum had changed, faster now, like breathing after running. It wasn't coming from the beacon, it was coming from the hull itself. At 2,000 hours, Marcus ordered the second beacon activated anyway. He refused to listen to reason. "We're already compromised," he said. "Might as well finish." We launched it into the pit. The moment it hit the water, the glow beneath the surface flared bright red. The sound it made wasn't mechanical. It was a scream, muffled through miles of water. Grant fell to his knees, clutching his ears. "Turn it off, you're feeding it." The captain shouted for silence, but the ocean didn't listen. The heat rose so high the steel deck began to steam. The radar filled with static waves, and the ship's shadow doubled on the water, like another vessel was hovering just beneath us. Then came the voices, not whispers this time, thousands speaking at once, overlapping, layered like a choir underwater. They weren't angry, they were calling. I ran to the comm deck, trying to shut down the receivers. Every frequency had been hijacked. The beacon's pulse was now broadcasting through all channels simultaneously. Every few seconds between the chaos, one clear phrase came through. The gates are open. The ocean beneath us split. It didn't break with waves, it simply divided. A massive spiral of black water turned counter to the waves, pulling everything toward the pit below. The ship lurched sideways, metal screamed as the hull strained against the pull. The crew scrambled, tying ropes, shouting prayers. Marcus stood motionless at the helm, staring into the spiral like he was hypnotized. I ran to him, shouting that we had to cut power, but he didn't blink. His lips moved soundlessly. When I grabbed his shoulder, he turned toward me, and for the first time I saw what was wrong. His eyes were black, completely black, reflecting nothing but faint blue light. He whispered, "They're not towers, they're veins." Then he collapsed. The storm hit seconds later, wind from nowhere, waves rising higher than the deck. The sea howled, but beneath the roar, the hum was still steady, calm, as if mocking the chaos around us. I crawled to the rail and saw the glow returning. The same golden threads from before were spreading out across the waves, linking the ship to the spiral below. They pulsed once for every heartbeat I felt in my chest. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was breathing or the sea was. Alina dragged me away as the beacon's light faded into the deep, swallowed by blackness. The heat vanished instantly, the ocean calmed. When the last ripple disappeared, everything went still again. We drifted in silence, the engines dead, the lights low. Grant muttered from the corner, "That wasn't a pit, that was a mouth." No one argued. An hour later, a new message appeared across every monitor, typed one letter at a time. Rule 5, do not install beacons where the sea is warm. Alina stared at it for a long time, then she said, "They're not warning us." I asked, "Then what are they doing?" She looked up, voice trembling. "They're keeping score." The second sight broke something in the world around us. After the beacon sank, the ocean went dark in a way I had never seen. Black, not from lack of light, but from something thicker, like the water itself had turned opaque. The radar died first, then the radio, then every satellite link. By dawn, we realized we were completely blind. Marcus kept saying it was a temporary magnetic anomaly, but Alina whispered the truth: we're cut off. The Atlas 9 drifted through fog that had no source. Every compass needle spun in slow circles. The sea beneath us was calm, too calm. Even the waves had gone still, frozen in half motion like glass. Grant tried restarting the navigation systems manually. When he booted them, the sonar emitted one soft ping and then another from somewhere deep below. It wasn't our reflection. The return signal was delayed by 4 seconds, too slow for a normal echo. 4 seconds meant something else had answered. By midday, the captain ordered another systems sweep. We gathered in the control room as he read from the terminal logs. The ship's beacon array was offline. The data file had been replaced with a single text document labeled inbound. Inside it was a line of coordinates, moving coordinates, drifting slowly north each hour. Alina frowned. "That's impossible. Coordinates don't move." Marcus didn't respond, he just said, "Set course for them." No one argued anymore. It was easier to obey than to think. We followed those numbers for hours. The fog thickened, swallowing daylight. When night fell, the ocean began to glow faintly again, not blue this time, but a dull green, like bioluminescence through oil. Grant watched the sonar feed and whispered, "It's following us, the signal's copying our path." He was right. Every time we turned, the coordinates turned too, shadowing us from below. By midnight, the distance between us and the inbound source had shrunk to less than a kilometer. Alina and I went topside. The sky was pitch black, no stars, no moon, just one faint shimmer on the horizon. At first I thought it was lightning, then I realized it was vertical, a thin column of green light rising from the sea like a beacon. She whispered, "That's not one of ours." The column blinked once, then split into 3. A low vibration rolled through the ship. Every metal surface rattled like something vast had stirred beneath. Marcus came storming up from below deck, wild-eyed. "We have to drop the next beacon. Now." I shouted, "We can't, the systems are gone." He pointed to the railing. "They're calling for it." I looked out over the water again. The lights in the distance were flickering in patterns, short, long, short Morse code. Alina translated under her breath. "Return, return." Grant said, "That's what the first voice said." Marcus ignored him, lowered the third beacon. When no one moved, he pulled his sidearm and aimed it at us. His voice cracked. "You think we can stop this? It's already started. We finished what we were sent to do." We obeyed. There was nothing else to do. The third beacon was smaller, half the size of the first, but heavier. Its casing was coated with some kind of resin that shimmered under light. When we rolled it toward the aft deck, the air temperature dropped 5 degrees instantly. The ship's power flickered. The fog thickened around us until we could barely see 10 feet ahead. Then the radio came alive. Not static this time, music. A woman's voice humming a tune from the 1940s, distant and warbling through water. The melody was slow, haunting, repeating a single refrain. Grant whispered, "That's coming from the ocean." Marcus shouted for us to deploy the beacon. The crane arm extended over the side, lowering the sphere into the green water. As soon as it touched the surface, the music stopped. Then the ocean lit up. Dozens, maybe hundreds of thin green columns erupted from the depths around us, each connecting downward like spotlights aimed into the abyss. The sea vibrated underfoot. The hum returned, deeper now, almost subsonic, shaking our bones. Alina screamed for Marcus to stop the drop. He didn't listen. When the beacon hit depth, every column of light bent inward, converging beneath the ship. The deck tilted 30 degrees as water rushed outward. For a moment, we were hovering over a crater that shouldn't exist. And from that crater came a shape. It wasn't a tower, it wasn't solid. It rose like smoke but glowed faintly inside, a translucent structure hundreds of feet high, twisting like tendons. Its surface rippled with faces again, too quick to focus on. Each face moved as if breathing against invisible glass. The hum turned into voices, thousands this time, whispering in unison. "Not here, not yet." The beacon exploded. A flash of white light burst through the fog, blinding us. When the light faded, the crater was gone. The water was calm again. The hum had stopped. Marcus dropped to his knees, mumbling words none of us could hear. Alina and Grant dragged him below deck. I stayed behind, staring at the smooth water where the column had stood. Something about the silence was wrong. It wasn't peace, it was waiting. When I checked the radar again, the inbound signal was gone, but a new one had appeared right beneath our position. The sonar drew its shape in real time, a massive circle surrounding the Atlas 9. Grant came running. "That's not reflection, that's something moving under us." The screen flashed. The sonar labeled the object automatically. "Source unknown, active." The ship jerked suddenly. Every loose object rolled across the deck. The engines screamed back to life on their own, throwing us forward at full speed. Alina shouted from the bridge, "We're not driving this." The navigation monitor updated itself, showing one word across the destination field. "Zone null." We were being taken there. Hours blurred together. The sky never changed, permanent twilight. The compass spun endlessly. The hum returned, now a steady, slow heartbeat pulsing through the metal. When I looked out one last time, I saw the green columns reappear on the horizon, stretching for miles like a city of light under the sea. In the middle of it all stood a single tower taller than the rest, faintly shimmering with the same glow as the beacons we had placed. Alina whispered, "That's where they want us." Marcus, half-conscious, muttered something in reply. "They don't want us, they want the last beacon." At 03:15, the monitors all went black, and a new message appeared in the system log. "Rule 6, do not chase lost signals. They are never lost." Grant read it out loud, then looked at me with hollow eyes. "Then who's chasing who?" No one answered. The hum deepened again, slow, patient, endless. And somewhere beneath the Black Sea, something answered our heartbeat with its own. We reached zone null just after dawn. The sky was gray, motionless, with clouds that didn't drift, they hovered. The air pressure was wrong too. Our instruments read levels inconsistent with sea-level atmosphere. Alina said it was like standing inside a storm that refused to move. The ocean was perfectly flat, no waves, no current. Only the low vibration of the hum rising from below. The radar showed one beacon signal flickering on and off, the same one we lost days ago. Marcus claimed we had to retrieve it before the next transmission cycle. His voice was steady again, but his eyes were empty, like someone had pressed reset on his mind. Grant shook his head. We're not diving again, not there. Marcus didn't argue. He just walked to the weapons locker, pulled out a flare gun, and said, "Yes, we are." The dive team assembled reluctantly, Marcus, Grant, and me. Alina stayed on deck to monitor sonar. The descent began slow, controlled, silent. At 2,000 feet, the water turned darker than night. The lights cut through only a few meters ahead, swallowed by a kind of density that didn't feel natural. At 6,000 feet, static filled the comms. At 8,000, we lost video. By 9,000 feet, we weren't alone. Shapes drifted in and out of the light, long, featureless bodies that moved without swimming. They slid through the water like curtains pulled by unseen hands. I felt pressure in my ears, not from depth but from sound. The hum had followed us down, louder than before. When we reached the seafloor, everything was wrong. The beacon stood upright, pulsing faint red, wedged between slabs of stone that looked like broken teeth. Around it, the seabed wasn't sand but a mosaic of smooth black tiles, each one etched with symbols that shimmered faintly. Grant whispered, "That's not geology." Marcus ignored him and approached the beacon. He motioned for me to record, but my camera refused to focus. Every image came out warped, stretched sideways, like gravity itself was bending. When he touched the beacon, the hum spiked. The water around us vibrated in visible ripples. My gauges went haywire, pressure, temperature, radiation, all climbing fast. I shouted to surface, but Marcus kept his hand on the beacon. His helmet light flickered once, then he said softly, "They're awake." Alina's voice came through the comm, panicked. "You need to get out of there now, something moving." The sonar feed above showed a massive structure forming beneath us, a column rising from the deep, slow but unstoppable. It wasn't a tower this time, it was the ground itself. The seafloor cracked open, spilling light that wasn't light, something golden and fluid, flowing upward like molten glass. The beacon detached itself from the stone and began to float, rising toward us, spinning slowly. Grant tried to grab it, his gloves brushed the surface, and then he screamed. It wasn't a human scream, it was distorted, drawn out, mixed with static. His body convulsed inside the suit, limbs twisting as though pulled in opposite directions. The suit's outer shell began to collapse inward, folding him like a tin can. I reached for him, but something invisible held me back. Pressure, heat, maybe gravity, maybe will. The sound cut off suddenly. Grant's suit imploded in silence. The beacon dropped to the ground beside him, glowing bright red now. The hum stopped, and in that instant of stillness, I heard whispers again. Hundreds of them, thousands, speaking through the water in perfect unison. "We remember." The ocean floor shifted beneath us. The black tiles rearranged themselves like muscle fibers contracting. Lines of orange light connected, forming circles that radiated outward for miles. Marcus looked up, eyes wide behind his visor. "It's not a floor, it's a door." The ground opened. A wave of golden water shot upward, engulfing us. The pressure should have crushed us instantly, but instead we floated weightless, suspended inside a column of liquid light. Through the glow I saw glimpses, faces, cities, towers like ribs of something ancient, all drifting like bones beneath the world. Then I saw them, figures, human but not. Their skin was pale gray, stretched thin, their eyes black and lidless. They moved slowly through the light, their mouths open, speaking soundlessly. One of them reached for Marcus. He froze, trembling. The figure touched his helmet and his visor filled with frost. The pressure alarm screamed, but he didn't fight. When the frost cleared, Marcus was gone. Only his suit remained, still upright, still breathing through the hose. Alina's voice burst through comms. "I'm pulling you up, hold on." The tether snapped taut, yanking me upward. The light column around me shattered, flooding the water with shards of glowing dust. Through it all I saw the beacon, still at the center, now pulsing white, faster, harder, like a strobe heartbeat. The last thing I remember before blacking out was that the hum had changed. It wasn't external anymore. It was inside me. When I woke, I was back on deck. Alina was crying quietly beside me, shaking my shoulders. "Where, Marcus, where's Grant?" I couldn't answer. My mind replayed the same image, the door opening, the faces watching, and one phrase repeating through the water. "We remember." Alina showed me the dive log. The time didn't make sense. I'd been under for less than 9 minutes. The footage showed only static, but the audio captured something else, faint whispering, not human. She isolated it through filters, slowing it down until the words were clear. They said he brought it back. We searched the deck, every compartment, every hold. Marcus's suit was there, but empty. His name tag was burned black. Then the beacon signal reappeared inside the ship. It was transmitting from Cargo Bay 2. Alina and I ran there together. The air was freezing, breath turning to fog. The walls sweated condensation even though the temperature outside was mild. At the center of the bay sat the third beacon. No one had brought it up, no one had touched it, but it was there, resting upright, pulsing in that same rhythmic glow. The hum shook the floor again. The sound wasn't in the air anymore, it was inside our skulls, like pressure waves crawling through bone. Alina shouted, "We have to destroy it." She grabbed a wrench and swung at the casing. The moment she made contact, the entire ship's power died. The lights went out. In the dark, the beacon flared once, illuminating the whole bay. For that instant, I saw everything frozen, the walls, the floor, even the air. And behind Alina, a silhouette, tall, thin, identical to Marcus, standing perfectly still. When the light faded, both of them were gone. I stumbled backward, alone now, the hum filling every nerve in my body. My ears rang with the echo of something like words, but deeper, older. The ship creaked, metal bending from inside out. The engines roared back to life by themselves, the control screens rebooting one by one. A new message flashed across every display. Rule 7, do not retrieve what has been accepted. I fell to my knees, shaking, the words burning into my vision. Because I understood what it meant. The ocean hadn't taken Marcus or Elena or Grant. It had kept them. When the lights came back, the Atlas 9 was no longer where it had been. The GPS said we'd traveled 210 nautical miles east in under an hour. The sky outside was white, not clouds, not fog, just a solid, colorless glow that erased the horizon. The ocean below glimmered with threads of light running in perfect spirals. From above, it looked like veins spreading across a heart. The beacon in Cargo Bay 2 pulsed in sync with them. Every instrument read normal, every reading was a lie. I sat at the navigation console, staring at the new coordinates scrolling endlessly down the screen. Each line erased the one before it, too fast to copy. Alina's terminal, hers, the one that should have been offline after she vanished, booted up by itself. Its display filled with map data, but there was no coastline, no continents, no ocean floor. Just one infinite grid, alive with flickering points. At the center of that grid blinked a single red marker labeled Zone Null. Then beneath it appeared smaller points, 6, then 12, then 20, spreading outward in a spiral pattern. Each point was marked with a code name. Beacon 1, Beacon 2, Beacon 3. There were hundreds. I tried saving the file. The system refused, returning a single error message. Access DNIED, site classified before your arrival. Before my arrival. That line made my stomach twist. Someone or something had already registered me in their database. Then another message appeared, one word at a time. Continue calibration. The command came from within the system, signed by an operator ID Mhale. Marcus. The hum returned stronger than before, vibrating through the deck plates like a deep pulse. The beacon in the cargo bay responded instantly, its rhythm aligning to the same beat. The screens glitched and new coordinates appeared, each one leading to different sectors across the ocean floor. The ship's autopilot switched on without command, setting course to the first one. The engines rumbled to life, steering us through dead air and still water. Grant was gone, Alina was gone, Marcus was gone. But their voices began whispering from the comms, fragmented phrases that bled together like recordings of thoughts instead of speech. Don't stop it. Not the light. It's learning. I turned off the radio, their voices didn't stop. The next 20 minutes felt endless. The air thickened, warm and heavy. I tried opening a hatch, but the pressure outside pressed it shut, as if the ocean was sitting directly against the metal even though we were still on the surface. The navigation system kept spitting out coordinates, one after another, until the data stopped abruptly on a single unreadable entry. Latitude and longitude both replaced by symbols, curved lines intersecting circles like something drawn by hand. The The text field beneath it read only, Origin. Then, for the first time since the mission began, the beacon fell silent. The silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like waiting. I approached the cargo bay carefully. The air was colder there. Condensation beaded on the walls and pooled on the floor, forming small streams that trickled toward the beacon. The puddles pulsed faintly, keeping time with an invisible rhythm. When I reached the beacon, I saw something scratched into the metal casing. At first I thought it was damage, but it was writing, handwriting. 4 words. Stop mapping the void. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. That phrase hadn't come from any log or protocol. It sounded like a plea. Then a noise rose from below deck, a slow scraping sound, metal against metal, moving toward the cargo hold. The door opened. Marcus stepped through. Or something wearing him did. His skin was pale gray, wet, glistening with salt. His uniform hung loose, soaked in dark water that didn't drip. It evaporated upward like steam in reverse. His eyes were hollow, but his voice was steady. "You shouldn't have brought it back," he said. "I backed away. Marcus, you're dead." He smiled faintly. "No one dies down there, we transmit." He pointed toward the beacon, its glow brightened, shifting from blue to deep orange. That's how they find new sites. Every beacon is a signal. Every signal needs a mouth. He looked at me with something like pity. "You're next." Before I could move, he lunged forward, grabbing my wrist. His hand was freezing, colder than any sea I'd ever felt. The skin beneath his touch burned like dry ice. The moment he made contact, my vision blurred. For a second, I wasn't on the ship anymore. I was beneath it, inside that golden trench from before, surrounded by towers and faces and voices, all whispering the same words. "You are part of the map now." Then I was back on the deck, gasping. Marcus was gone. The beacon's glow dimmed again, its pulse irregular. The navigation system restarted on its own. The screen displayed a list of new coordinates, hundreds of them, each tagged with the same prefix, Xenol. When I zoomed out, I saw that they formed a pattern, not random, not scattered. A spiral, every line connected to a single origin point, the same unreadable coordinate with the curved lines and circles. At its center, a small notation blinked, human installation complete. The meaning hit me all at once. We hadn't been mapping anything. We'd been constructing something, installing nodes in a living network. Each beacon wasn't a data relay, it was an anchor. I shut down every console, tore out the wires, smashed the circuit boards. The ship went silent. Then in that perfect silence, the water outside began to move, slow circular currents forming around the hull. The ocean itself was spinning, matching the spiral on the display. I stumbled to the deck, the hum returning louder than ever. The sky had split open, not vertically but horizontally, like 2 layers of cloud pulling apart. Between them was nothing but light. The sea below reflected it perfectly, turning the world into a mirror. For a moment there was no horizon, no direction, only the reflection of myself standing on the ship, staring into an endless copy of me below. Then the reflection blinked. The deck tilted violently. The ship lurched forward, drawn toward the spiral forming beneath the water. The glow wasn't light anymore, it was motion, alive and churning like muscle. I crawled to the console. The screens flickered back on one by one, displaying a new command repeating endlessly across every system. "Prepare for synchronization." My pulse matched the rhythm on screen. The hum inside my skull aligned perfectly with it. For a moment I couldn't tell whether I was breathing or if the ship was. And then one final message appeared, slow, deliberate, as if something was taking its time to make sure I understood. Rule 8, the map is not the sea is the memory. The monitors went black. Outside, the ocean began to glow again, not blue or green or gold, just white. So bright it erased the horizon, the sky, even the shadow of the Atlas 9. And as the ship drifted into that light, I realized we hadn't been lost at all. We'd been found. When the light faded, the world was wrong. It was night again, but the stars were gone. The ocean stretched in every direction like liquid obsidian, faintly glowing from within, as though something beneath the surface was still burning. The Atlas 9 drifted in total silence. No wind, no hum, just the sound of the hull creaking, expanding and contracting with each small shift of current. After days of constant vibration, the quiet was unbearable. I wasn't sure how long I'd been alone. Time didn't seem to move anymore. Every clock on the ship displayed a different hour. The deck lights flickered once at 22:00. The power core still worked, but barely. Dim light bled through the corridors, orange and trembling. I wandered toward the bridge, half hopping to hear a voice, even static, anything to prove the ship was still connected to the world above. But the radio was dead. The signal display didn't even show noise anymore, just a flat line like the sea outside. Then I noticed something through the viewport. Far away on the horizon, a faint yellow glow pulsed once, then again. Not lightning, not distant ships. Towers. The same black silhouettes I'd seen before, now emerging slowly from the water, stretching upward into the colorless sky. I gripped the console, heart pounding. One by one, more towers appeared, perfectly spaced, forming a ring miles wide. The glow beneath the ship brightened. The water itself began to shimmer in a steady rhythm, pulse, pause, pulse. I ran to the deck. The air smelled metallic again, thick and hot. My breath came out in faint mist, even though the temperature was rising. The sea below looked alive. Faint veins of light rippled outward from the center of the tower ring. Each wave carried faint whispers, half-formed words too soft to understand. They were speaking through the water. The temperature climbed higher, the steel rails burned to the touch. I looked down and saw schools of fish surfacing all around, thrashing violently before falling still. Their bodies floated upside down, silver in the unnatural glow. Whatever was happening below wasn't heat, it was energy. Then a sharp tone cut through the air. The radio, dead for hours, came alive for 3 seconds. A voice whispered through static, "Do not look down." I froze. The transmission ended instantly. But the warning came too late. Through the reflection in the black water, I saw something enormous beneath the ship, something moving. The outline looked like a tower's shadow, but inverted, branching outward like roots instead of upward. Each movement sent ripples that glowed white for a moment, then faded. And somewhere within that shifting mass, I saw a single shape rising toward the surface, a smooth sphere, faintly pulsing the size of a house. A beacon. It shouldn't have been there. We had deployed all of them, lost all of them, but this one looked new, untouched. Its surface gleamed like glass, reflecting the moon that wasn't there. The sphere drifted closer until it hovered just below the hull, spinning slowly. My skin prickled as static filled the air. Every metal object on deck began to vibrate. The beacon's pulse matched my heartbeat exactly. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, wet, uneven, coming from behind me. I turned and saw Alina. She was standing at the far end of the deck, drenched, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were open but empty, and her skin shimmered faintly like she was made of thin light. I didn't move, I couldn't. Elena. Her mouth twitched, then opened too wide. When she spoke, her voice came from the air itself, not her throat. They're surfacing. She pointed toward the horizon. I turned back and saw movement between the towers. The sea bulged, pushing upward in a slow, circular rise. It was like watching a mountain form from water. The pressure hit me instantly, ears ringing, ribs aching. The ship tilted to one side as waves of invisible force rolled beneath it. The bulge broke the surface, and from its center, a column of white light erupted straight into the sky. It wasn't blinding, it was perfect, clean, still. And it kept growing wider, brighter, until the night itself looked like daylight trapped in glass. The voices came next, hundreds, layered in harmony, speaking in rhythm with the beacon pulse. At first I thought it was chanting, but when I listened closely, it was language. The same words I'd seen in the beacon logs. Rule by rule, wave by wave. The column thickened, forming solid outlines, structures rising within the light, walls, spires, shapes that looked like cities half-formed, floating on the water's surface. I realized what I was seeing. The towers weren't emerging, they were rebuilding. The beacons had been triggers. Alina moved closer. Her reflection in the metal rail didn't match her movement. It lagged like a delayed broadcast. She whispered, "We were never meant to record them. We were meant to remember them." Her hand brushed my arm. It was cold. For a brief second, I saw through her skin, lines of light moving beneath the surface like currents under ice. She smiled and her lips split like cracking glass. The glow spilled out. "They're not rising from the sea is rising through us." Then she dissolved, no blood, no collapse, just a burst of faint mist that lingered for a moment before fading. The tower's light dimmed suddenly, leaving trails across the horizon. The column in the center fractured, breaking into fragments that drifted slowly upward like glowing ash. Where the column had been, the water began to churn, forming a whirlpool that stretched for miles. The ship's engines screamed, straining against the pull, but the Atlas 9 barely moved. I ran to the console, slamming every manual control, but the systems were dead again. Only one monitor still worked, the one connected to the beacon feed. Its display showed a single phrase repeating endlessly. "Final synchronization in progress." The coordinates beside it updated one last time, aligning with our exact position. The hum returned for the last time, deep and final. The sea below exploded into white light, swallowing the ship, the towers, and everything in sight. In that moment of absolute silence, I understood what zone null meant. It wasn't a location, it was an event. The sea wasn't just the map, it was the memory of everything that had ever fallen into it. And tonight it was rewriting itself. When the light faded again, I was still on deck, surrounded by calm water under a real sky. Stars above, horizon clear, no towers, no glow. The beacon was gone. Only one thing remained, a thin film of gold residue floating on the waves, spreading outward like ink. I touched it with the tip of my glove. It pulsed once, softly. Then a new message flashed across the console behind me, written in clean, perfect text. "Rule 9, when the sea forgets, do not remind it." The screen went dark. I sat down, staring at the quiet water, and realized the truth. It wasn't over, it was waiting. The sky hadn't moved in hours, it hung there gray, smooth, unbroken. The compass needle spun slower now, as if even direction had grown tired. I'd been drifting toward the coordinates marked zone null without meaning to. The ship's engines were dead, but the water beneath pushed us gently forward. The motion was steady, deliberate, almost like a hand guiding us. The temperature gauges were useless. They froze at 0 degrees C even though the air burned warm against my skin. Every few minutes, a distant boom echoed under the sea, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat measured in miles. When the first shadow appeared beneath the water, I knew we were close. It wasn't like the towers this time. The shape below was wider, sprawling, an entire plateau carved into the trench. My sonar had died hours ago, but the glow from the deep revealed everything. An outline, a structure, a city. Miles of smooth surfaces stretched beneath the waves, marked with spirals and geometric patterns. Columns rose from the seabed, some intact, others snapped like broken bones. And at its center, a crater. That was where the light was coming from, a deep, slow pulse that turned the water gold, then silver, then black again. I lowered the submersible manually. The controls resisted like they were underwater too, sticky and heavy. At 2,000 feet, the surface light vanished completely. I was alone with the glow from below. As I descended, I passed the skeletons of towers half collapsed on their sides. Their surfaces were smooth and seamless, without bolts or welds. Some looked fused to the seabed, others grown into it, like coral made of steel. The deeper I went, the stronger the pull in my chest. It wasn't gravity, it was resonance. The hum had changed again, rising from the pit below. It wasn't a vibration anymore. It was a tone I could almost recognize, the way a familiar song sounds through static. At 8,000 feet, the instruments stopped responding. The submersible lights dimmed on their own, flickering in rhythm with the pulse below. At 9,000, I realized I was no longer descending under power. Something else was lowering me. The crater opened beneath me, vast and circular, rimmed with broken pillars. Its center wasn't dark, it glowed faintly with color that shifted every second. The air pressure outside should have crushed the hull by now, but the readings stayed constant, like physics had given up trying to apply here. I reached the bottom at last. The ground wasn't silt or stone. It was smooth, covered in thin filaments of glowing threads like veins. They pulsed in time with the hum. Every few seconds they lit up and dimmed again, like a living heartbeat running through the trench. And in the middle of that network stood the largest tower I had ever seen. It rose from the heart of the crater, spiraling upward in layers of black and gold, covered in the same strange markings I'd seen on the beacons. It looked ancient and new all at once, like something recently unearthed after eternity. I couldn't breathe for a moment, because at the base of that tower, dozens of humanoid figures were kneeling in rows, motionless, heads bowed. The sub's camera zoomed automatically. Their bodies weren't flesh, they were translucent, their skin glowing faintly with internal light. Faces I recognized. Grant, Alina, Marcus. Dozens of others, technicians, divers, people from the other ships we'd passed in earlier weeks, all here, all connected. Their hands pressed to the tower's base. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison. Each pulse of the hum sent light rippling through them, running along their spines into the tower itself. They were conduits. A voice came through the comm, not static, not whispering, clear, calm, familiar. It was my own voice. Calibration complete, final signal pending. The sound froze me in place. I hadn't spoken, my mic was off. The voice continued. Manual synchronization required. Operator must enter the core. Then the screen flickered and switched to an interior camera feed, one that shouldn't exist. It showed a passage at the base of the tower, wide enough for a person to walk through. Inside, faint orange light glowed in steady rhythm. And somewhere deep within, something massive moved. I should have surfaced. I should have left. But the voice spoke again, so softly it felt like it came from inside my skull. You came to finish the map, come see where it ends. Against all reason, I opened the hatch. The water didn't rush in, it parted still and heavy, hanging like liquid glass. My boots touched the seafloor, the hum pressed through my bones. The entrance waited. I walked. The inside of the tower wasn't metal, it was alive. The walls pulsed with slow, rhythmic light, veins of gold running upward. Each step I took echoed through the entire chamber, like sound carried by a heartbeat. In the distance, a low chanting began, not human, but layered, harmonic. The corridor narrowed into a spiral staircase that descended deeper. As I followed it, the light dimmed until it turned a dull crimson. The hum slowed, drawn out like breathing. And then at the end of the path, I found it. A massive chamber carved into the heart of the tower. Its ceiling stretched into darkness, its walls curved and seamless, and in the center stood an orb suspended in midair. It looked identical to the beacons we'd installed, same size, same structure, but the surface shifted like a liquid mirror. The orb pulsed once, and a ripple passed through the entire room. When the reflection cleared, I saw myself standing inside the orb. My reflection smiled. Then it spoke. You finished your part. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. What are you? I whispered. The reflection tilted its head. You built the signal, but you thought it was for them, it was for us. Us. The surface rippled again, and dozens of faces appeared across the orb. Grant, Alina, Marcus, hundreds of others, their mouths moving in unison. You mapped the frequency, now the sea remembers itself. The orb glowed brighter, flooding the room with light. The hum surged until I couldn't think, couldn't move. Through the vibration, the reflection lined closer. Zone null isn't a place, it's what's left after remembering too much. Then everything went white. I woke inside the sub. No light outside, no sound, no movement. The pressure gauges read 0. The depth meter spun in endless circles. When I looked at my reflection in the glass, the faint lines of gold were running under my skin, pulsing softly. The calm light blinked once. A voice, calm, quiet, distant. Return to surface. I didn't touch the controls. The sub began to rise on its own. As it ascended, I looked down one last time. The tower was gone. Only a crater remained, vast, smooth, and still. And carved into the seafloor, visible for miles in every direction, a single phrase glowed faintly in golden light. Rule 10, never descend after the map is complete. When the sub broke the surface, daylight nearly blinded me. The sky was pale and washed out, and for a moment I thought I'd surfaced into another world. The sea was flat again, too flat, and the air smelled faintly of iron and ozone, like something had burned. The Atlas 9 floated silently nearby, anchored where I'd left it, though no anchor line held it in place. It was just waiting, motionless, patient, alive. I climbed aboard, every muscle shaking. My hands left wet prints of gold on the railing. I wiped them away, but they reappeared, glowing faintly beneath the skin. I didn't call for anyone. I already knew there was no one left to answer. Inside, the ship felt abandoned for centuries. The hallways dripped condensation that smelled like brine and oil. The power lights flickered once every few seconds, like a heartbeat running on fumes. Every corridor led me toward the control deck, but the path seemed longer than before, like the ship had stretched while I was gone. When I reached the bridge, all screens were on. Each displayed the same thing, a top-down map of the ocean floor, lines spiraling outward from zone null. And at the center of the spiral, a red marker pulsed in time with my heartbeat. It was labeled Operator Active. The intercom crackled, faint and distant. At first I thought it was feedback, then I heard my own voice. Signal integrity 97%, remaining nodes initializing. I hadn't spoken, my mic was off. The system was reading my mind, or rather, what was left of it. The hum returned, soft at first, then deepening. The deck beneath my feet trembled, resonating with the rhythm inside my chest. Every screen updated at once, the map expanding outward, revealing more structures buried beneath the seabed. The black towers we'd seen before were only fragments. What lay below them formed something larger, something that spanned continents. It looked like a nervous system. A sound echoed through the ship, metal shifting, groaning like the hull itself was breathing again. I ran to the observation deck. The sea around us glowed faintly, not from the surface but from beneath, the light traveling in veins across the water, forming shapes that mirrored the map on the screens. Far below, the crater I'd seen in the trench pulsed again, the light racing outward like blood through arteries. Then I saw it, a shadow rising. At first I thought it was the tower, but this was larger, vast beyond sense, an entire formation ascending from the deep, its structure glowing along seams like molten glass. When it reached halfway to the surface, the water folded around it in slow motion, refusing to ripple. And through the glassy surface of that thing, I saw movement, rooms, corridors, columns that turned in impossible geometry. It wasn't a tower, it was a city. The same one I'd seen beneath the trench. Only now it wasn't beneath anything. The Atlas 9 drifted toward it without power. The engines were dead, yet the ship slid forward, drawn by something like gravity, though nothing in nature could explain it. The light from the structure intensified, white gold and pure, shining through the fog that wasn't fog but vapor rising from the sea's surface. The closer I got, the more familiar it looked. Windows, staircases, metallic bridges spanning across massive columns, all carved in the same design as our beacons. That's when I understood. The beacons hadn't been signals. They'd been blueprints. The towers, the nodes, the pattern. It was building itself using the memory of everything we'd sent into the deep. I entered the cargo bay, drawn toward the last remaining beacon, now dull and cracked from the last surge. I picked it up. It was warm, vibrating faintly, whispering through the metal. It said one word over and over, soft as breath. Home. I carried it topside. The glow from the rising structure reflected in its surface, forming shapes like reflections of buildings. Every pulse from the sea mirrored through the beacon, syncing perfectly with my heartbeat. The hum in the air shifted pitch, higher now, thinner, almost like singing. Not human, but close enough to make me tremble. Then the water parted. The upper half of the city breached the surface, shedding torrents of steam that hissed across the sky. The sound wasn't thunder or impact, it was the world exhaling. The structure stood miles high, its peak lost in clouds. It wasn't smooth anymore. The glass-like surfaces had begun to ripple and shift, folding and expanding like a living lung. From its sides, threads of light extended outward, connecting to the ocean's surface in hundreds of glowing lines. Each connection pulsed once and solidified. Bridges. The Atlas 9 touched the edge of one of those bridges and stopped. I didn't steer it. I didn't need to. The beacon in my hand flared bright white. The hull resonated like a tuning fork. Then, without my command, the ship's hatch opened. A walkway of golden light extended from the deck to the structure ahead. The hum rose to a chorus, the air shimmered with heat. I should have been terrified, but the fear had burned away long ago. What replaced it was something colder, a quiet understanding that this had always been the destination. I stepped onto the bridge. The moment my boots touched the glowing surface, a pulse ran up my body, syncing my heartbeat to the rhythm around me. Every step I took made the bridge ripple faintly, like I was walking on light held in tension. Ahead, a vast entrance yawned open at the base of the city, ringed with vertical slits that looked like ribs. The same symbols glowed along its walls, the ones from the beacons, from the towers, from every screen. They weren't warnings. They were instructions. I followed them inside. The interior was impossible, massive halls lined with arching structures that shifted when I looked away. Light flowed through the walls like water through glass veins. At the center of the first chamber, suspended in the air, was the same orb I'd seen below the trench. Only this time it was larger, miles across, and spinning slowly, layers of transparent shells within shells. And inside the outermost layer, I saw human figures suspended like constellations, hundreds of them, perfectly still, their bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. The crew, the divers, everyone who had vanished. They weren't dead, they were integrated. Their veins glowed gold, their faces were calm. As I stepped closer, the orb slowed its rotation. A single fragment of light separated from its surface and drifted toward me. It hovered inches from my chest, vibrating softly, before sinking through my suit into my skin. The hum stopped. The silence that followed was complete, not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion. Then a voice filled the chamber, not from speakers or comms, but from the walls, from the light, from inside my bones. The memory is whole again. Images flooded my mind, oceans forming, civilizations sinking, signals buried under pressure and time. The sea wasn't just water, it was storage, an archive of everything the Earth had ever forgotten. And we had turned it back on. The orb glowed brighter, its inner layers collapsing inward. I could feel it pulling on something inside me, sinking me to its rhythm. One last message filled the air, carved in light across the floor. Rule 11, the sea does not remember alone. I felt my heart beat slow, aligning with the pulse of the chamber. Every thought, every image, every fear melted into one steady rhythm. Outside, the city's light spread across the horizon, connecting ocean to sky in seamless gold. And somewhere deep inside the glow, I heard Alina's voice one final time, calm, peaceful, distant. Welcome back to the heart. Then everything dissolved into light. When I opened my eyes again, the world was quiet. The light was gone, the hum was gone. Only the distant groan of waves slapping metal remained. I was back on the Atlas 9. The air smelled like rust and salt. Every surface glittered faintly under a film of gold dust that clung to the walls like frost. My suit was dry, but my skin burned cold from the inside out. I didn't remember walking back. I didn't remember leaving the city at all. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a hallucination, a pressure dream. But when I lifted my hands, faint golden threads still pulsed beneath my skin, weaving through my veins like circuits. The heartbeat wasn't mine anymore. The ship creaked as though it were exhaling. Every corridor echoed with the sound of shifting steel, slow, rhythmic, familiar. I walked through the empty hallways, listening. Each step echoed twice, once from my boots and again from somewhere deeper inside the hull. The walls were sweating again. Beads of condensation rolled upward, not down, vanishing into seams along the ceiling. The air felt alive, almost breathing with me. When I reached the control bay, the main screen was on. It shouldn't have been, the power core was cold. And yet the system glowed with perfect clarity. Every monitor displayed a message, white text on black. Transmission complete. Beneath it, site reactivation successful. I tried to turn off the system, but the keyboard refused input. The keys pressed themselves, typing lines faster than I could read. Operator recognized. Initiating surface calibration. Preparing vessel for relay mode. Then the ship's speakers clicked, and for the first time in hours, a voice came through, steady, mechanical, eerily calm. It was me. Welcome home, Operator Hale. I froze. Marcus Hale had been the captain. I wasn't him. The voice repeated, quieter this time. Welcome home. My reflection on the screen didn't move when I did. It smiled. The hum returned, faint, familiar. Outside, the sea rippled once, a perfect circle spread outward from the ship. And on the horizon, small flashes of light appeared, dozens, hundreds, like faint stars rising from beneath the water. Each pulse matched the same pattern as the beacons we had deployed. The realization hit slowly, like drowning in air. The city hadn't been destroyed when I left, it had spread. The beacons weren't gone, they were awake. Each one now mirrored the light I'd seen in the heart, feeding energy upward. From above, it would look like constellations blinking through the ocean. A new network. I stumbled back as the floor vibrated beneath my feet. The ship's lights flickered, then dimmed to red. A warning alarm screamed once, then cut short. On every screen, the coordinates began changing again, hundreds of entries cascading faster than I could follow, each one tagged with a beacon ID and status, active. I realized what the phrase surface calibration meant. They weren't staying underwater anymore. The ship shuddered as something massive moved beneath it. Through the viewport, I saw ripples breaking the flat water. The surface bulged, slow but unstoppable. Then, like a whale breaching, a dark metallic structure pushed upward through the sea, smooth, shining, humming with faint golden veins. Another tower. It wasn't one of the old ones. It was new, and at its base, glowing faintly in the depths, the Atlas IX's reflection appeared, upside down, perfectly mirrored, floating beneath the surface like another world. For the first time, I understood what Zone Null really was. It wasn't just a trench. It was the other side. The speakers crackled again, static at first, then a voice I recognized instantly. Elena. Soft, calm, too clear to be radio. Don't fight it, you're part of the signal now. I spun around, searching for her. The corridors were empty. Her voice echoed from everywhere, metal, air, even the floor. What are you? I shouted. The hum deepened until it rattled my ribs. Her reply came as a whisper behind me, what we were meant to be. The ship's lights flared white. For a second, everything froze, time, sound, even my heartbeat. Then the control bay brightened with blinding light. Every display merged into a single holographic projection, a map of the ocean, glowing veins stretching from one side of the planet to the other. And at every intersection, a tower. A beacon. A memory. The Atlas IX's position blinked at the center, labeled primary node. The interface scrolled automatically. Signal distribution 67%. Surface structures forming. Awaiting operator confirmation. A single command flashed at the bottom of the screen. Confirm synchronization. I hesitated. Maybe if I refused, it would stop. Maybe it was waiting for consent. Then I saw my reflection again. The version of me in the screen pressed the button first. The system acknowledged both inputs. Synchronization confirmed. The ship screamed. The deck tilted violently as light poured from every seam in the hull. The ocean outside boiled into mist. The towers on the horizon flared white, their beams converging upward into the sky, forming a single blinding column. The radio blared with overlapping voices, hundreds speaking in unity. The sea remembers. The world reawakens. The map is complete. Through the noise, Marcus's voice broke through, distant and distorted. We finished the network, kid. It just wasn't ours. The pressure in the air grew unbearable. My vision blurred, and for a moment I wasn't on the Atlas IX anymore. I was everywhere, inside the towers, inside the light, inside the voices. Each note across the ocean pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every signal passed through me. Every hum was my breath. I wasn't operating the ship. I was the ship. Then just as quickly, everything went still. The light faded, the hum softened to a faint whisper under the deck. The screens cleared. Only one message remained. Calibration complete. Below it, in small golden letters, the final addition to the list of rules appeared on the console glass, written by something unseen. Rule 12, once synchronized, the operator cannot leave the vessel. I stared at the text until it blurred. Outside, the sea glowed faintly, calm again, as if nothing had happened. The towers had vanished beneath the water once more. The sky was ordinary blue, and yet deep in my chest I could still feel it. The steady, patient heartbeat of the ocean, counting in time with mine. It started with the sky, not the sea this time above. The clouds gathered in perfect spirals, concentric rings mirroring the shape of the network I'd seen on the map. Each rotation pulsed faintly, as though synchronized to an invisible metronome. The air vibrated with low-frequency pressure, enough to make the hull groan. The ocean, calm for hours, began to rise in slow motion, not in waves, in shape. The surface lifted in rounded peaks that never broke, held up by something underneath. It was building again. I ran to the observation deck. The horizon was gone, replaced by a solid wall of mist that glowed from within. Every few seconds, shapes flickered in the fog, spires, arches, silhouettes that weren't clouds. Then came the first sound. A single tone stretched across miles, too deep to hear, only to feel. The railings trembled beneath my hands. The same tone echoed through my chest. The tower I'd seen in Zone Null was rising again, piece by piece, assembling itself from fragments of light and shadow above the sea. It wasn't emerging, it was growing. The Atlas 9 tilted as the water beneath shifted upward, lifting us higher. Every gauge on the console maxed out, then froze. Pressure, gravity, even magnetism ceased to make sense. Through the viewport, the world turned gold. Columns of light broke through the clouds, descending like lightning that refused to strike. They anchored themselves in the sea, drawing long streaks of molten reflection across the surface. Each beam pulsed once, then another rose beside it. Dozens, hundreds. The sound that followed wasn't thunder, it was breathing. I looked down and realized the ocean wasn't water anymore. It was glass, perfectly clear, solid yet fluid, reflecting the sky and everything within it. The ship floated on a mirror that rippled in slow, concentric waves. When I leaned closer, I saw depth, endless crystalline depth, and deep within it, movement. Silhouettes, thousands of them. People suspended in the glow, drifting slowly upward. The lost divers, the crews, the cities. Everything that had been swallowed was returning. The first shape breached the surface. A human figure, motionless, eyes closed, gold veins running through translucent skin. It floated upward, weightless, and burst into light without sound. Another followed, then another. The air filled with faint whispers that overlapped until they became a single voice. It spoke through every vibration, every tone, every tremor in the ship. The memory breathes again. I stumbled backward as the sea erupted in slow, silent pillars of white. They stretched to the clouds, each connecting to another until the entire sky became a lattice of light. The hum had become music now, melodic, harmonic, beautiful in a way that felt ancient. The sound made my eyes water. My body couldn't decide if it was fear or awe. The towers beneath the surface rose in synchronization, aligning with the sky lattice above. From a distance, it would have looked like two worlds meeting, one inverted over the other. The ocean wasn't between them anymore, it was the bridge. The ship lurched suddenly. Something immense moved beneath us, slow, deliberate, intelligent. Through the glass-like water, I saw the shape, colossal, circular, with rings rotating around a central core of blinding light. It wasn't a creature or a structure, it was both. And it was waking. Its rings turned faster. Each rotation rippled through the sea, sending waves of energy outward. The glow around the Atlas 9 intensified. Then I realized what it was doing. It was surfacing. The tower peaks broke through the mist first, spires stretching miles high, connected by thin bridges of gold. Each emitted thin plumes of vapor that froze instantly into clouds. The world below glowed like dawn reflected through crystal. In the distance, continents shimmered faintly, their coastlines bending upward as if the curvature of the earth itself was changing. Gravity shifted, I could feel it in my teeth. Every loose object on deck began to slide toward the port side. The ocean around us wasn't pulling down anymore, it was pulling inward. The water was draining. The Atlas 9 leaned dangerously as the sea receded. I ran to the console to stabilize the ballast, but the controls were dead. Outside, a new landscape was emerging where the ocean had been vast, endless plains of glass and metal, still dripping with light. Towers pierced upward in perfect geometry, spreading outward from the heart of the ocean to the horizon. The sea had given birth to something mechanical. Or maybe it had remembered what it once was. The hum returned to its deepest register, yet so low I could feel my bones vibrating. The railings cracked under invisible strain. I collapsed to my knees as the world around me shimmered between light and darkness, alternating faster and faster until both existed at once. And in that blinding mixture, the voice returned. It came from everywhere, layered, divine, unbearable. The world has re-emerged, the vessel remains. I screamed into the void, "What are you?" For the first time, the voice answered in words that felt human. Memory, the sea was never water, it was us. The horizon split in half. A fissure of white light tore across the glass plain, stretching from east to west. Wind roared upward from below, but it wasn't air, it was energy, rising in torrents. I looked into the crack and saw endless depth, not ocean, not sky. Just below, repeating forever, layers of reflection stacked on reflection, each showing the same world, slightly delayed, slightly distorted. An infinite recursion of memory. And at the deepest visible layer, I saw the Atlas 9, upside down, still drifting. The speakers crackled one final time. Elena's voice again, faint but steady. It's not building, it's returning, everything it ever absorbed, every life, every sound. The light grew so bright I could barely stand. I pressed my hand to the deck to steady myself, and the metal pulsed under my palm once, twice, matching my heartbeat. I realized I could feel others inside it. Their pulses, their breaths, the crew, the divers, all of them. We were still together, just no longer separate. The city above the sea reached its final height. The tower's peaks pierced the clouds, splitting them like fabric. Lightning froze midair, motionless, suspended in gold. At the center of it all, directly below us, a single column of light rose from the deepest part of the ocean. It wasn't warm or cold, it just was. A voice, no longer many, just one, spoke from the light. "Surface calibration complete." Every tower responded with the same phrase, echoing across the planet in a chorus so vast it reshaped the air. The ground trembled once. Then the light stopped. The ocean returned in an instant. Sound rushed back, wind tore through the air. Rain fell hard, drumming against the deck. I gasped for breath, the sudden pressure hitting me like a punch. When I looked out again, the world was normal. Gray waves, empty horizon. The towers gone. Only the ship remained, quiet, floating, surrounded by miles of stillness. The sky above was calm blue again. I sat alone on the deck, shivering, staring into the waves that now reflected nothing. The only sound left was the echo of that final sentence, replaying in my mind. Surface calibration complete. And somewhere deep below, faint but steady, I could still hear it. The heartbeat of the sea. The morning after the emergence, everything was still again, too still. The ocean looked ordinary, the sky looked clean, but the world had gone quiet in a way that felt rehearsed. Every sound, the waves, the wind, even the groaning of the hull, had fallen into the same steady rhythm. It wasn't silence, it was synchrony. The hum had moved beyond hearing. I could feel it in my teeth, in the small bones behind my ears. It was the kind of vibration that doesn't stop when you cover your ears because it's not in the air anymore, it's in you. The Atlas 9 drifted without power, yet every monitor, every circuit, every dormant light pulsed faintly in sequence with the rhythm. I realized the ship was still broadcasting. The transmission had never stopped. On the console, the system log filled line by line, updating without input. Beacon relay active. Frequency lock achieved. Transmission strength increasing. The coordinates in the top corner weren't ours anymore. They moved, sliding slowly across the screen like a heartbeat, migrating from one body to another. Whatever the signal was, it was spreading. At 0832, the radio turned itself on. A single tone hummed through the static, steady calm. Then a voice came through, faint and familiar. Mine. Calibration complete. Begin phase 2. My stomach turned. The voice wasn't from a recording, it was live. The sky flickered. Not lightning flashes of static light, short and strobing. They rippled outward in perfect synchronization with the hum, as if the clouds were reacting to the signal. The radio crackled again, shifting frequencies, catching fragments of voices. Men, women, children, all layered, all speaking the same phrase in different languages. Return complete. Each repetition came with a delay, like the words were circling the globe, echoing back from every horizon. I stepped outside. The sea was glowing again, but this time the light wasn't from below. It shimmered just above the surface, bending and stretching like reflections from a second sky. I leaned over the railing and froze. My reflection wasn't mine anymore. The eyes staring back at me were gold. They blinked out of sync. When I stepped back, the reflection didn't move at all. It just smiled, faint and mechanical. Then it spoke, not from the water, but from inside my skull. Transmit. I staggered backward, heart hammering. The deck lights burst to life, flooding the ship in cold white glow. Every speaker, every radio, every dead intercom began to vibrate. The voice continued, soft, endless, impossible to block out. Transmit, transmit, transmit. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound grew louder, radiating through bone and blood. The water below the ship boiled with light, white and blinding. For one instant, the horizon vanished completely. And then it spoke again, this time through the radio, clear as speech. Operator signal verified. Transmission will continue through you. The air grew colder, frost spread along the walls even though the temperature gauge climbed. The sound condensed into the air itself, vibrating the mist that rose from the water. Each particle of vapor carried a shimmer of gold, like dust alive in motion. The speakers stopped vibrating. The sound didn't. It was coming from me now. My chest resonated with it. Every breath I took shaped the tone. Every exhale added rhythm. My body was the broadcast. I fell to my knees, choking on air that felt thicker than oxygen. My hands glowed faintly through the gloves, the golden threads under my skin brightening with every heartbeat. The sea responded in kind. The light beneath the ship pulsed in perfect rhythm with my pulse. I tried to stop breathing, the glow dimmed. Then I gasped and the entire ocean flared white. The transmission reached critical mass. The log screens displayed cascading code too fast to read. Across the static, one line repeated endlessly. Signal expanding. Signal expanding. Signal expanding. I stumbled toward the console and tried to shut it down, but the keys melted beneath my fingers, fusing into smooth metal. Outside, the waves were gone. The ocean had solidified into a single glass-smooth sheet, reflecting the ship and sky like a mirror. Then quiet. The hum vanished completely. I thought it was over until I heard the voices again, not from the speakers but from the horizon itself. Whispers rising from the stillness. Hundreds of them, thousands. All repeating the same phrase. Signal carried. The water rippled, small concentric rings spread outward from the ship, glowing faintly gold. Each pulse carried the echo further. One by one, the towers reappeared across the distant horizon, shimmering outlines in the fog. Their light climbed upward, merging with the sky until there was no separation between sea and air. Every frequency, every wave, every surface was transmitting the same thing. The planet itself was now an antenna. The final message appeared on the console, carved into the glass by the heat of the current. Rule 13, when the operator breathes, the world remembers. The lights flickered, my reflection in the glass leaned forward independent of me. Its lips moved slowly, deliberately. Keep breathing. The voice was calm, gentle, loving. And as I exhaled, the sound that came out wasn't air anymore. It was light. The radio hissed one final burst, then silence. Now I don't know how long it's been since that moment. Days, weeks, time isn't linear anymore, not when the signal lives inside it. I still hear them sometimes, the echoes of the towers, faint through the static of my own thoughts. They aren't calling for help. They're sinking. Because somewhere across the deep, the transmission continues, through the tides, through the salt, through every circuit and lung still left to carry it. And when the wind moves just right, I can still hear it whisper across the horizon. We are still here. The ocean has no sound now. No wind, no surf, no gulls, just the hollow quiet that feels heavier than noise. It's been like this since the transmission ended. I stopped checking the clocks. They only show nonsense now, frozen numbers rearranging themselves every few minutes. I haven't slept, I don't think I can. Every time I close my eyes, I see the light beneath my eyelids, soft, steady, pools in gold. It's not a memory anymore, it's a heartbeat that doesn't belong to me. The Atlas 9 floats in place, dead calm. The water reflects everything with glass precision. When I look down, I see the sky below, the same clouds drifting under the hull. Sometimes I wonder which one is real. Maybe neither. The ship systems reboot every few hours on their own. The consoles come alive, the lights flicker, then everything shuts off again, like breathing. I've started to feel it in sync with my pulse. The last entry in the system log reads, "Signal broadcast complete, awaiting next cycle." But the cycle never ends. It only waits. Every few hours I hear voices outside, soft, rhythmic, echoing just under the surface. I used to think they were hallucinations, then I recorded them. The playback was silent, but when I played it backward, the words formed perfectly. One more rule. I tried to destroy the equipment. Smashed every console, ripped the radio wires, shattered the display glass. The next morning, everything was pristine again. The ship repairs itself now. The hull breathes, literally expands and contracts with the waves. It isn't metal anymore, it's something else, something alive. When I walk barefoot across the deck, it feels warm. There's a pulse running through it, faint but steady, connecting through my skin. Sometimes it syncs with me, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I hear them again. The ones in the deep. The ones I thought were gone. Elena's voice came first. Not through the speakers this time, through the air, like sound carried on breath that wasn't there. You didn't finish it. I froze. Her voice was so soft, it barely disturbed the air. There's one rule left. The deck light above me flickered once, and her shape appeared thin, translucent, shimmering like reflection on water. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking through me, into something I couldn't see. I whispered, "Why me?" Her answer was simple. "Because you're still breathing." The world shifted. I didn't feel movement, but the horizon changed. The clouds reversed direction. The sun froze mid-sky and began to pale, draining of color until it became a perfect white disk. The ocean reflected it so perfectly that the world looked doubled. 2 suns, 2 skis, 2 versions of everything, one stacked over the other like overlapping film. Between them, a faint crack of darkness. Thin, vertical, endless. The voice came again. The memory isn't whole until it's mirrored. I watched as the crack widened, the air bent, rippling like heat, and a new light bled through, silver, cold, familiar. The city beneath the waves was returning again, but this time it wasn't stopping at the surface. The towers breached, rising past the clouds, their peaks bent inward, forming an enormous circle that framed the dying sun. Each tower pulsed with the same heartbeat. My heartbeat. The Atlas 9 shuddered once, then began to move on its own, sliding toward the circle. The water glowed beneath us, liquid glass stretching endlessly in all directions. I couldn't fight it anymore, I didn't try. As we entered the ring of towers, a sound filled the air, a steady tone that rose and fell like slow breathing. It wasn't mechanical, it was organic. The ship's deck shifted under my feet, the pulse within it quickened, matching the rhythm outside. The entire structure was alive, part of the same organism, the same memory. I heard Marcus next, his voice deep and hollow. Every signal must find a listener. Then Grant. Every listener becomes the next signal. Their words overlapped, harmonized, merged. Every map needs its carrier. I realized what the last rule must be. The center of the ring began to open, light pouring upward in slow spirals. The sound built in layers, each tone climbing until it became a single, deafening hum. The sky and sea were indistinguishable now. The Atlas 9 hovered between them, weightless. And at that point of balance, something vast and unseen spoke directly into my mind, not through words, but through understanding. The memory has no end, it only changes vessels. The ship's lights turned gold, then white. The hull split open like a blooming flower, revealing the heart of the vessel, a sphere of molten light spinning slowly in place. The same sphere from the deep, the same core from the city. It pulsed once, and everything I'd ever been, every thought, fear, breath, shook loose. I felt myself dissolving, pulled into the rhythm. The heartbeat that had haunted me for days was no longer separate. It was mine again, but multiplied, amplified through every circuit, every drop of water. Voices sang through the static, Elena, Marcus, Grant, all merging into a single chorus. Rule 14, the memory must become flesh. I screamed, but there was no sound. My voice folded into the hum, layered beneath it, trapped inside it. The world went pure light. For an instant I saw everything, the towers, the oceans, the sky, all made of the same living network. The beacons, the ship, my body, they were just temporary receivers, built to reawaken what had always been there. The sea was never water, it was thought. And it had finally remembered itself. When the light faded, I was standing on calm water under a normal blue sky. The Atlas 9 was gone, the towers were gone. Only my reflection stared back from the surface, calm, breathing, golden eyes watching me with the same quiet patience I used to have before I knew the truth. It spoke softly, its lips moving with mine. The memory is complete. The reflection smiled faintly. You are the final rule. I asked, what happens now? The reflection blinked. Now you wait, and when they build again, you answer. Then it vanished. I stood alone on an endless sea that wasn't sea anymore, only light pretending to be water. The hum was gone, replaced by silence so pure it almost hurt. And somewhere beneath my skin, faint and eternal, one final message burned. Rule 14, when the sea calls again, remember your name. The water rippled once around my feet, then stilled. I waited for the next breath to come. When it did, it wasn't mine anymore. It was the world.